In my previous video we tackled the game with only our fists, doing essentially no damage. In this video we will be going over the opposite problem. What if we were as fragile as a Twitter user and couldn't take any damage? Well, it's time to find out and ask. Can you beat The Witcher 3 without taking any damage? The rules for this challenge are short and simple. If I take any damage during this playthrough, I will reload a previous save. Quen would go against the spirit of the challenge, so I will not be using it, and to top it off as usual, I will be playing on Deathmatch difficulty. Starting our journey in White Orchard, I for some reason decided it was a good idea to fight the ghouls at the beginning, which gave us our first of many resets. Once we defeated the ghouls, I made my way to the nearest inn, where I effortlessly beat some locals. After all, violence is the answer to everything. We quickly made our way to the Nilfgaardian camp and went to collect griffin bait. On the way, a pack of dogs gave me some trouble, giving us far more resets than I was expecting, and making me realise this playthrough was going to be about as enjoyable as jumping on broken glass barefoot. Eventually, I managed to defeat the level 1 dogs, and we now had our griffin bait. Going into the fight with the griffin, I can't say I was too confident, but luckily we were actually doing damage to the griffin compared to my fists only fight. Since I was too scared to get hit when using our sword, I decided to play it safer than a Marvel movie, and only used Igni to deal damage. With only a few resets, eventually the griffin was toast, so we could now prepare to leave and head for Velen. Despite Vesemir suggesting to stay out of trouble, he couldn't help himself from interfering, leading to a quick yet painful massacre of roughly half of the village population before leaving with Yennefer to go meet up with the Supreme Leader. He gave us some incredibly vague leads on finding Ciri, and we were on our way. When we made it to Velen, we almost immediately engaged in some good old-fashioned alcoholism before heading out to find our first contact. With a couple more resets added to our counter from some dogs, we looted Hendrik's body and raided through his possessions, and came across his diary, which was a shame since I can't read. After learning nothing from the book, I made my way to the Baron to see if he knew anything. In a stroke of luck, it turned out he knew exactly what happened to Ciri, and we reached a part of the playthrough I didn't expect to struggle with at all. But of course, I turned out to be wrong about that. What I came to realise is that the sections with Ciri were going to be an absolute nightmare. Since we can only use our sword, getting hit became far too easy. I got hit so many times during this section I genuinely couldn't believe it. Our reset counter was rising and it showed no signs of stopping. Eventually, I did discover some beautiful cheese. That being, to hit a wolf, then run away until they stopped following me. With the wolves dealt with, we moved on to fight the King of Wolves. This fight should not have given me as many resets as it did. I got extremely tilted and took more hits than the average gamer's desk. After a while, I managed to control my patience and recovered from my skill issue, and the werewolf went down. One thing that drove me insane during this playthrough was the fact that every time you load a save, the game plays a short cutscene recap of the current plot. I mention this now because on this part alone, I had to hear about Ciri quarrelling with a witch roughly 30 times. With the Baron's flashback of Ciri over, and along with it my anger, we went on to do some nosing around the Baron's place, to look for clues about his family. On our way to meet the Peller, one of the Baron's henchmen slapped me on the arse like a Blizzard executive, forcing us to reset and file a complaint to HR. To nobody's surprise at this point, the wolves around the Welshman's goat gave us some trouble. I don't know why, but I just can't seem to figure out what to do against wolves. With the Peller's goat returned and a rat sacrificed, we returned to the Baron to deal with his botchling. Initially, I started out by trying to fight the botchling, but after my first attempt and realising it didn't take any damage from fast attacks, I decided to reset and try turning it into a Lubberkin instead. This proved to be a mistake, since with how many wraiths we had to fight in this section, getting hit was almost a certainty. After once again realising this wasn't going to work, I went back to the original plan of fighting the botchling. We got hit quite a few times in this fight. Phase 1 was incredibly easy, I just ran around and threw out the occasional Igni until it got to half health. When the botchling reaches this point, he starts to regen health, just to be a minor inconvenience, and summons back up to be a major inconvenience. After playing like a massive pussy using a mix of Igni and Axii, making sure to take minimal risks to get hit, the botchling was killed. I also remembered potions existed, so that came in handy. The Baron wasn't best pleased with us re-killing his child, but unfortunately for him, I just couldn't give a shit. We took a blood sample from his now twice deceased kid and returned to the Peller. With the blood, we had to perform a ritual, but as seems to be a running trend in this video, I ended up getting hit by a pack of wolves on the way to the site. When we eventually made it to the ritual, I did what I do best, and that would be dancing around and just praying that I don't get hit, which surprisingly actually worked. Now that the ritual was complete, a local family got doxxed, and we went on our way to show up at their address, where we politely gathered information on the Baron's family. After doing all this, I decided it might be a good idea to go around and collect some places of power to get some skill points, and while doing so, I stumbled into the cave to kill the tree's heart, despite having no motivation or reasoning to do so since at this point, I hadn't yet entered the swamp to talk to the crones. We got hit a few times fighting the heart, but overall the encounter was extremely easy through the power of spinning in circles and using art to practice social distancing. With our side tangent out of the way, I went on to find Kira, and quickly dragged her into our personal matters, chasing the wild hunt through a random cave. Our 69th reset came anticlimactically to a rat biting my ankles. With the super terrifying rodents dealt with, I moved on to the next challenge of the cave, dealing with Geralt's biggest fear, portals and hounds of the wild hunt. This went about as well as I expected. Fucking horribly. It turns out being confined to a human-sized snow globe to fight in while trying to dodge and deal damage is surprisingly difficult. If I accidentally leave the bubble for even a moment, that's a reset. But by using fire against the frosty boys, eventually, with enough patience, we made it through. Kira decided it was the perfect time to be overly dramatic to fall into my arms, and we went on to immediately fight Nithril. This fight turned out to be pretty easy. Most of the hits I took were purely from my own stupidity, and accidentally getting too close to the middle of the arena. But once I got my shit together, me and Kira just bullied him into a corner until he died. With the cave behind us, I went on a trip to the swamp, which led to an instant reset, because my stupid ass ran straight into the giant green ball of toxic gas. When we made it to the house in the swamp, we immediately began interrogating the kids for some information about Johnny. One of the kids shared with us what we needed, and my game crashed. This next gen update is fantastic. When we loaded back in, a water hag was completely unfazed by our flamethrower and gave us a cheeky slap, so it was back to the loading screen for me. We found Johnny and jumped back into fighting drowners, but they didn't put up a fight at all to my crossbow and abusive game mechanics. The harpies and wyvern, protecting Johnny's voice, proved to once again be a pain in the ass to deal with. We didn't get hit, but that doesn't change just how annoying they are. With Johnny at our side and his freedom of speech restored, we went back to Gran and blackmailed her into introducing us to the crones. They tasked us with killing the heart in the local forest, which we had already done earlier, and honestly, I was kind of a bit disappointed that there was no special dialogue for doing it in advance. We gave them an ear, and they told us some information about Ciri. During the flashback, I got hit before I even gained control, which seemed perfectly reasonable and fair in my opinion, since it was entirely a skill issue. We quickly escaped the wild hunt and went back to being Geralt. Thanks to us radiating pure masculine energy, the crones couldn't help but spread their legs for us. We returned to the Baron with the information on his family, and because his wife and daughter wouldn't return, he started trauma dumping about being a cook, but unfortunately for him, I just didn't care. In exchange for finding his family, Sneeko told us what he knew about Ciri and we left. Before heading to Novigrad, I had one thing left to do while in Velen, and that was to speedrun the Fyke Isle questline to have a quick date with Kira. But as with all good things, this turned out to be bait, and she used us for her own personal gain. What a bitch. With our sexual escapades behind us, we went to Novigrad and found Triss as normal. Her package was wet, which was new for me, as I usually have the opposite effect on women. Next up, we took on the witch hunters with ease. This was mostly because I'm pretty sure that part of the next gen update included a buff to allies to actually deal a reasonable amount of damage, instead of just being mostly cosmetic. We parted ways with Triss and immediately went on to engage in some violence with our dwarf friend Zoltan, before violating our friend's boundaries and going through his personal belongings. This of course led us to questioning most of the female population of Novigrad about Dandelion's whereabouts. Our initial questioning ended up with the cremation of a group of bandits, and no information gathered, outside of that Radovid allegedly sucks flaccid cock, but that wasn't going to stop us. We had to get our revenge on Rosa from our fists only playthrough, so we made our way to her house, brandished our wooden sword, and beat her harder than an Asian parent, which apparently upset CD Projekt Red, because once again my game crashed. Rosa hit us a few times after we reloaded and caught me off guard, since I was expecting this to be the easiest part of the playthrough. Now that our beating had happened, we went back to Zoltan and met up with a bard at the local inn to discuss our plan to save Dandelion. For some reason, this included taking a bath with our friends and was absolutely necessary to progress. As a man of many talents, we investigated Dijkstra's pipes and quickly got bitch slapped by a drowner. We discovered that somebody used a homemade bomb to break into his vault and steal his fortune, so of course it was up to us to find out what happened. After committing several crimes and letting Triss engage in some BDSM, we learned what we needed but refused to share this with Dijkstra. Flawless detective work aside, it was now time for us to give a nice friendly visit to Junior. First up was his casino, which gave us some trouble. At one point I got myself locked outside somehow, and in some attempts Geralt just decided to forget he was in combat and refused to fight. And to top it all off, even getting through the door was difficult at times thanks to Cleaver's henchmen deciding to block me outside. Eventually, I developed a working strategy of running up and down the stairs like a Scooby-Doo chase sequence, and managed to beat our way through the casino. And I have no idea how, but I managed to fail the quest to help Cleaver's dwarves. Moving on from raiding the casino, we made our way to Junior's arena to blow off some steam, and signed up to fight, but not before I let my intrusive thoughts win and attacked Igor unprovoked. We ran into a bit of trouble with the Endreggers using their big AoE attack, but after taking the advice from the internet on how to deal with spiders, we killed them with fire. For some unknown reason, Junior, despite complimenting our fighting skills, ordered his men to have us killed, which in my opinion is rather rude. Defeating his men didn't prove to be much of a challenge. I just spent most of the time dancing in circles waiting for my stamina to come back before slowly chipping away at their health. With the arena now cleared out, we handed over what we knew to Dijkstra and went over to meet with our good friend Vernon Roach, who kindly took us to see our favourite flaccid cocksucker. He gave us some shitty chess analogies that don't really make sense, and also the location of the man who tried to order our death. Making sure to waste no time, we blazed our way through Junior's henchmen and made it inside of the mansion to confront him. He hurt Ciri and he wasn't going to get away with it. We had a nice flashback finishing off a bunch of men in a tight space, and as punishment for hurting Ciri, along with his other crimes against humanity, we gently put an end to his existence. All that remained to rescue Dandelion was to get the attention of our friend Dudu, and to do this we took a nap listening to Priscilla before putting on a play. The play was a success and Dudu put into motion freeing Dandelion through the power of identity theft. With all the pieces of our plan in place, we ambushed the witch hunters and attempted to save Dandelion. They of course retreated, and we had to give chase. Trying to get into the secret passage to save Dandelion proved to be the most difficult part about freeing him, since the trapdoor refused to give me a prompt to open it. I suppose I should have called the lockpicking lawyer. The witch hunter inside went down without a fight. As it turns out, having a 100% burn chance on Igni makes some fights quite trivial. We removed Dandelion's gag so we could learn about Ciri and quickly left for Skellige. Unfortunately for us, getting there didn't go quite so smoothly. A group of pirates decided we were the perfect target for a raid, which turned out to be quite the inconvenience. With our ship ruined, I made my way to Kertralda, leading to me needing to reset when a step bandit attacked me when I got stuck. This ignited my need for revenge, so after a quick reload, I took care of them. We made it to the port, and fitting in with the theme of this run so far, watched a guy get cremated and a woman burned alive. Not much of note happened at the work, although I did have a race with Ceres, but I think I finished a bit too quickly. Not to worry though, I hear a lot of guys have that problem. When we made it back to the keep, we moved on to committing various crimes with Yennefer, stole a priceless artifact, and fled the scene. The next day, I met up with Yennefer in the forest to find out what happened to Ciri. We used the mask, which made it go from priceless to worthless, and saw visions. During these hallucinations, we were attacked by foglets, which proved to be not much of a problem at all. My approach to this section was the same as my approach in the bedroom. Sit back and let the woman do all the work. I'm just kidding, of course. I make challenge videos on YouTube. I don't get laid. From the visions, we learned Ciri had a powerful ally, and moved on to wreak more havoc elsewhere by performing some necromancy and absolutely ruining the local wildlife. Resurrecting the corpse showed us some insight into what Ciri got up to in Skellige. Things got hot and steamy in the flashback, but I do suppose that is what a sauna is for. The wild hunt rudely interrupted our relaxation, so we got cold feet and ran away. Now that we knew what happened to Ciri for the most part, we could go back to Kaer Morhen and put a plan together. Before we set off for Kaer Morhen, we collected Uma and swiftly got stopped by some Nilfgaardians, just so we had to deal with the Emperor having a full-blown entitled Karen episode, demanding that we bring him Ciri. Bad news for him though, I'm not the manager, I'm a witcher. With that awkward encounter behind us, I set out to Kaer Morhen to engage in some uneventful fetch quests for Yennefer. This was in order to perform some unethical experiments on Uma to remove his curse. He gained at least 3 feet from this, making him perfect for dating apps, and as a reward gave us a light to guide us to Ciri. We stole a random boat and followed the magic light into the mist. This had the great side effect of failing nearly every quest in the game, since in this playthrough I left them as untouched as a Reddit mod. After a brief cutscene, we followed the light some more, and to my surprise, had the goofiest reset so far. I was hit while riding the boat, and I didn't even make it to land. Once we made it on dry land, I had the pleasure of watching a dwarf jump off a cliff, and found Ciri, who appeared to be as lifeless as the average customer service worker. Miraculously though, she woke up, and we teleported back to Kaer Morhen to escape from her stalkers. We couldn't spend too much time catching up though, we had to prepare to face the wild hunt, in which I helped by doing absolutely nothing. With the bare minimum preparations done, it was time to fight. I somehow missed the portal when trying to disable it, leaving me speechless for a moment. I'm not even sure how I managed to do it. Retrying this section went much more smoothly, and I was able to disable the portals before having to retreat inside the stronghold. Once inside and regrouped with our squad, the fighting proved to be quite satisfying. Using the gas pockets to create big explosions like a Michael Bay movie, and trying out different signs to deal damage, made combat feel much more dynamic and fun than how I had been approaching it so far. Unfortunately, no matter how much we fought, we couldn't overpower the wild hunt, and eventually we had nowhere to run. Our defences failed, and momentarily I became an ice cube. Vesemir met his end, and we couldn't just let that slide. After sleeping, Ciri woke us up to sneak off and do a bit of murder, which I guess is one way to kill the mood of the party going on at Bald Mountain. We arrived and failed the vibe check to be granted permission to climb the mountain, but that wasn't going to stop us. I collected a coin, and in true British fashion, some fat bloke tried to mug me, but all I needed to do was drop some signs and wait for him to die. With the path to the top now clear, it was time for me to take on Imlerith. Or at least it would have been, if the game didn't decide to crash again. The Imlerith fight was quite easy. He is very sluggish, so avoiding his attacks wasn't that difficult. I did get hit a few times though during this. After some attempts, I realised just popping some Lego on the floor and letting him walk over it was more than enough damage needed to finish him off. That, and using fire to turn him into Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars Episode 3. Now that one of the generals was dead, we returned to the others and began final preparations to face those that remained. First on our to-do list was Avalach. He wanted to take us to a sketchy looking basement to show us his portal, and since I ignored my parents about stranger danger, I happily followed him. We ended up in a desert being attacked by sand crabs before being teleported to the next location. We breezed through this area with ease and found the portal to the third location. And this is where with great sadness I have to announce that no matter what I tried, I couldn't avoid taking damage here. I would apologise for this, but unfortunately I don't have a ukulele. The snow, no matter what I did or what I tried, did damage to me. No potions could help me, not even Quen was able to prevent the damage. But with that being said and the challenge failed at this point, I pressed forward to complete the run regardless. Shamefully, we made it to the portal and ended up back in Novigrad. Next on our to-do list was to help Ciri tie up her loose ends in the city. She took us to meet Horson Jr., who despite being killed earlier, was apparently still alive. We got inside his hideout and I was just about to finish the job, when he revealed he was actually Dudu and was in fact just pulling a classic YouTube prank in the hood that almost went wrong. Moving on from that disaster, I burned a guard to steal some horses, said goodbye to Ciri, and went to talk to Triss. She was trying to track down Philippa, and with a bit of magic, we found that she was currently in the bathhouse. Geralt appeared to be extremely excited by the news of a woman being in a bathhouse, and started throwing punches during the cutscene. This excitement wouldn't last long though, as reaching Philippa wasn't going to be easy. She summoned a fire elemental that I had to defeat before reaching her. This was a problem. In a small arena with barely any room to dodge the fireballs, and not being able to get close without taking damage, our only hope was to use Ard and hope that we could kill it before it hits us. On a side note, this is where I learned the Ard damage skill slaps hard and would have been incredibly useful earlier. After some patience, we defused the situation, and then almost instantaneously escalated it again by twisting Dijkstra's leg like an extreme version of Bop It. The last thing to do to prepare was to help Yennefer, where nothing really noteworthy happened. We saved Rita, and that was about it. With our preparations complete, we sailed to Skellige, and this time we didn't get our booty plundered. We arrived at the port and were instructed to search for the Sunstone. Our first lead, Ermion. This went about as well as diplomacy in North Korea. When we showed up to the keep to ask some questions, negotiations between them and the Nilfgaardians clearly went south. Blood was spilled, and I was caught in the crossfire, but instead of trying to solve things with words, we just jumped straight to violence. With our political endeavours over, we learned the location of the Sunstone, but before finding it, I tagged along with Yen and Ciri to disrespect Avalak's privacy by breaking into his lab and snooping around. Ciri wasn't too thrilled with what she discovered, so in an effort to relieve some stress and anger, I encouraged her to smash up the place like a psychotic ex-girlfriend. Moving on from vandalism, I embarrassingly ended up getting shot by the Nilfgaardians during my nighttime swim, but at least I was able to talk to the Emperor and piss him off even more than he already was, and portaled away. On my way to search the ruins for the Sunstone, I eagerly dove headfirst into my boat, and in my concussed state, sailed to find the cave. Once at the ruins, I followed Philippa, fought a golem, and solved a puzzle. Apparently that's all we needed to do to obtain the stone. On the way out, however, I ended up getting lost quicker than the Titan sub searching for the wreckage of the Titanic, but after a few minutes, I found my way to the exit and we were now ready to summon the Wild Hunt. There was no going back now, it was the final stretch of the playthrough. We jumped off of the boat and ended up getting frozen, kind of ironic given how many times my game froze in this run. Moments later though, we thawed out and we could begin our fight with Caranthea. I used to consider this fight to be one of my favourite fights in the base game, however, this opinion did not last long when trying to fight him hitless. It was nearly impossible to get hits on this guy. Every time I got close, he would just teleport away. And if that wasn't bad enough, my sword was somehow doing even less damage than my fists. So like every other fight, I had to resort to the same solution deaf people use, sign language. I had lots of close attempts in this fight. Surprisingly, dodging turned out to not be my main struggle. It was just the dealing damage that was hard. Carelessly trying to get hits and getting hit instead ended up being the main source of my resets. And eventually I got a bit lucky, and he decided to stand still, dropping Fortnite emotes for a bit inside of my signs. With Caranthea dead, we dodged past everything and raced to Eredin. And what the actual fuck is this fight? I started at 176 resets going into this, surprisingly low to be fair, but I had no idea what I was in for with this fight. This icy boy made me rage harder than an incel at a speed dating event. He just wouldn't stop teleporting around the place. He was jumping around more than my ADHD ass jumping between tabs while trying to write the script. Anyway, in phase 1, I figured out if I got 2 Ards off quick enough, he wouldn't do anything and would just skip straight to phase 2. Which is easier said than done, since far too many of my resets came from the game deciding I wasn't in combat when loading into the fight, so Eredin would just get a cheeky hit on me and I would be back in the loading screen. Phase 2 I can only describe as a mess. After phase 1 he must have done a few lines of coke, because that's the only way I can explain this attack pattern he would do. Seriously, how the hell am I supposed to hit this guy? I had a super close attempt early on and my heart sank when I got hit. From there on, the reset counter just kept rising and rising with no indication of stopping, not even reaching the 3rd phase of the fight. Eventually, we got lucky and made it to the 3rd phase, and I was just praying to not get hit. I popped down a Yerden and started dancing in circles hoping it would be enough, and with that, we did it. Eredin went down. All that remained was to climb the mountain with Yennefer and confront Avalak. And conveniently, just after saving, my game crashed for the 100th time. We made our way up the mountain, let Ciri go off to do her own thing, and with that, we did not beat The Witcher 3 without taking damage. If it wasn't for that one snow section, we would have been fine, but being British, I am very much used to complaining about the weather. Now before we end the video, it's time to address the most common request I had on my previous challenge. Dettlaff fists only. And since it's not really enough for a full video about it, I decided to add it at the end of this one as a bonus. So without further ado, it's mobbing time. In my first attempt fighting him, I found out it was nearly impossible to die in phase 1. His attacks only do about half my health, and as long as you are dodging, you can't really get hit. That being said though, I found it quite difficult to actually deal damage to him. He doesn't take damage from fast attacks, so I was forced to use only strong attacks. And to top it all off, I could only hit him directly after he does a quick attack of his own. But with enough patience, waiting to get hits, and doing our good old fashioned ballerina dancing to regen health if we did get hit, we made it to phase 2. Phase 2 was an absolute mess on the other hand. He had 3 different attacks. His first attack was easy to dodge, and in fact I didn't get hit by it a single time. He performs a very telegraphed lunge at the player, dealing an unknown amount of damage. His second attack, however, proved to be more of a pain than a vegan at a barbecue. He would gather a swarm of bats around him and launch them towards Geralt, and unfortunately for me, this one-shots us. Our only window to deal damage was when he landed on top of us and left a puddle of blood on the floor. Rinse and repeat, and that was phase 2, absolutely shitting myself every time he launched his bats at us, just praying it wouldn't hit me. We take off his wings, and our favourite Morbius enjoyer gives us a sweet sensual kiss on the neck, before continuing the fight into phase 3, with a slight change of scenery. We had to destroy 3 hearts around the arena while avoiding the Dettlaff chasing us trying to throw hands. This phase was easy in hindsight, but while actually doing this phase, my hands were shaking more than an elderly person. It was my first time reaching this part, and I really didn't want to fuck it up and have to go through phase 2 again. I wasn't sure if his attacks would one-shot me, so I played extremely carefully, and only going for hits on the hearts when I was 100% sure I would be fine. I did eventually get hit though, and I discovered that it only did about 80% of my health, enough to be scared of, but not enough to kill me. And that's the part that matters. With enough time, my palms sweaty, knees weak and arms heavy, I managed to destroy the final heart. It was almost over. All that remained was to finish the weakened Dettlaff. A few more final punches and he was defeated. We saved Regis from the rubble and let him bite into the neck of Jared Leto, and with that, I beat Dettlaff with only my fists. I'll leave a link to the full unlisted fight in the description with no audio below. I absolutely loved this fight and wish the other bosses in the game were designed in a similar way. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more, subscribe. And if you didn't, then don't I guess. Let me know what games and challenges you want to see next. Links to my other socials are in the description below. Have a good day guys.